So today we're going to be installing some iBoard running boards on this 2007 Honda Element. I'm not a mechanic or anything like that. I'm just handy, at least that's what my wife says when she wants me to do something. So let's jump right into it. All right, first things first, these are the tools you're going to need at a minimum. You need a 10 millimeter, 12 millimeter, and 13 millimeter open end wrench and sockets, a screwdriver, or a pry bar, small pry bar. The next thing I always like doing is I like going ahead and separating and sorting all my screws, nuts, and bolts, making sure that everything is there. And although the instructions have a list, the list isn't very clear. But down in the comments, I went ahead and created a visual guide. It's a PDF that has photos in case you need to. But once you separate them and sort them by quantity, it'll become a lot easier for you to understand what goes where. Now the first thing, I don't have a lift, so we're gonna jack it right here in the driveway. The most important thing is safety. So I like doing 2 points. I like leaving the jack underneath, and I like overdoing it. I don't want to get my head smashed in. I also lift it up just enough, and I put a couple pieces of 4x4 under the tires just in case all fails. I won't get my head crushed like a grape. But anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that you jack from the proper points and get your jack stands in place, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump into that right now. All right, now that we got the car jacked up and pretty safe, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is I like separating all the nuts and bolts into groups the way that they're going to go so that they're easier to find. And the very first part about this build is these 2 brackets. This one's labeled DF, which is driver's front. This one is driver's front, but these are interchangeable. The only one that's different from left to right side or driver's side is the rear bracket. So the rear bracket is the only one that's different. Now, note that this goes underneath. So these are going to take these 4 flange bolts. And again, it goes under. Now, one of the things that the manual or the instructions constantly tell you is just to finger tighten, which I agree with, because it's going to give you some more wiggle room when you're installing, and also when you go to do the final adjustments, you can go ahead and tighten everything down. Now, this is the front bracket. The front bracket is mounted at 3 points underneath the car. It goes mounted like this. These go into the side rail, and these go into a more inner rail. And when we go to install these, there's a trick with this angled part. If you notice, this part has a slight taper to it, and we're going to go install that now. Now these get installed with these brackets, with these nuts and bolts, which I like. Again, I like assembling them beforehand and having them ready. It takes 3, 2 here and then 1 here. Another little tip, I have this magnetic wrist holder that allows me to put things so that when I'm underneath the car, everything is accessible. And if I'm not mistaken, this is a 13 millimeter socket. I'm going to take this and my impact driver, mainly because one of the angles is a little bit difficult to get to, so you will need an extension. And we'll jump under the car and we'll get this going. All right, just to orient yourselves, this is the front of the car and that way is the back of the car. Now these are the 2 main mounting points, and this is the 3rd one. Now you notice this is kind of at an angle, which matches up with this angle. One of the hardest parts about doing this is threading the screw, believe it or not, because it doesn't go perpendicular to the horizon. It kind of goes in at the same angle of the taper, and it's really difficult to start. So one thing I did earlier, and I'm going to do it again, is I'm actually going to put the 3rd bolt in. I'm going to put the 3rd bolt in, and then that's going to help me hold this up. So I have 2 hands free to get the first 2 bolts started. So you notice I backed off a little bit because I do want it to have some play, because it's important. And again, these bolts are just so difficult to get in. don't want to cross thread them. So there we go there. Especially if you're using an impact driver or any kind of mechanical device, you really want to make sure that you have it threaded properly, because otherwise you'll cross thread it and then you'll be in bad luck. All right, so this is all loose, and that's going to be important for the once everything is adjusted, then we tighten everything down. Now we're going to go to the back. So this slips in this way, and this is, you'll see the body mounts inside, this so that they don't fall in. Do that to both, and then the sequence for these is it's going to be regular washer, lock washer, and then the nut. So that's the order that those will go in. But they're 16mm nuts. So make sure you take your 16mm socket. The fronts are 13s, the backs are 16s, just to make sure that you got everything right. And again, take a screwdriver, because most of the time there are some rubber grommets that are covering the holes that you got to pop off.
Action. Yeah.
All right, so you see these are the rubber gaskets, little rubber plugs that cover these holes. So this just pops off there, pops off there, no big deal. You can toss those. And these are the nuts that go in there, or the bolts I should say, that go there. Again, these rubber, nylon, plastic bushings, whatever they're made out of, they were made so that you don't push the screw in and lose it forever. And then again, this is the rear bracket, and it's pretty self-explanatory. There's only one way it could really go. The driver's side, and then the driver's side, this bar is really obtrusive. I did the passenger side first as a kind of a warm-up, and this bar didn't exist. And again, one of the challenges with this is this bolt, even with that plastic retaining clip, it wants to push in. So getting the nut started is a little bit of a challenge. Wasn't that hard on the other side, but it's getting hard here because of this bar. It's really kind of in the way. To that one, I guess to this one again too. Another thing I noticed on the passenger side, these bolts actually extend quite a bit, so you might have a problem if you don't have a deep socket. So it's just something to consider. I didn't have I was almost at the edge of the socket being able to grab on the passenger side. So now this is here, and now we're going to get to mount the actual running board. This is the underside of the running board. This is pretty simple. Just go ahead and slip these 4 square head bolts on it, and then once you're ready, those take a washer and a nylon lock nut. The nylon lock nut is 10mm, so I have a 10mm socket right here, and that one I am gonna use impact driver because it's pretty straightforward. And once you get it there and align it, the next parts are pretty easy. Now what I did on the other side is I just laid it down there first and then aligned it, because otherwise you try to do it from the top, it'll take you forever. First 2. And that's it. Now we're gonna put our nuts and washers. Now again, for me, one of the most important things is making sure that you have your nuts and bolts threaded properly, especially if you're using an impact driver. Because if you don't, you end up cross-threading it and nothing will ever be the same. So what I did is I aligned it and I have them all the way out. I did the same thing on the other side to make sure. And then those are gonna lock down right there. And again, adjusting the in and out of the board itself, it'll be relatively easy compared to adjusting the underside, because this you can do from the outside. You don't need to lift the car or anything. And basically, that's it. All I need to do now is go back under there, tighten up all the bolts, which are just finger tight, get it all in there, and lower the car, and it'll be ready to go. And again, if there's any kind of adjustments we need to do, we could do the adjustments right on the running board. So once we tighten that up, we'll take a shot and see how they came out, and you'll see they look quite nice. So here's the finished product. These are the 5-inch version of the running boards. If you'll notice on this one, I left it a little bit separated from the body. As I mentioned earlier, this is my mother's car and she's a little bit older. Give her more of a stepping area, and I don't know what looks better. And I'll show you the other side now. Here on the passenger side, if you notice, I tucked it in much closer to the body, giving it a little bit of a sleeker look. There's not a separation. I don't know what she's gonna prefer, but as I mentioned earlier, adjusting the in and out and front and back of the running board adjustment is something that's fairly simple to do. You can do it with a 10mm wrench, and that's about it. So that's the end of it, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, great, thumbs up, or if you think I said something stupid, let me know. I think the only mistake I made was not putting the 16mm socket that was needed at the beginning, but other than that, I think it was not bad. Total time, first side took me about 45 minutes, second side took me about 30 minutes. Enjoy.